My name is Ghostboy259, and I played Bookwalker, Thief of Tales. Bookwalker was developed by Do My Best as their second game, the first being The Final Station, and it's a game that switches between first and third person perspective where you play as Etienne Quist, a writer tasked with entering books and stealing valuable artifacts for a man known as the Collector in exchange for lessening your criminal sentence. While the gameplay at its core is more akin to a point-and-click adventure game, ultimately the perspective switch doesn't add a lot of variety or become all that meaningful. The puzzle aspects are very simple and require little to no brain power 99% of the time, and the combat is inconsequential as you immediately revive and continue the fight with all the damage you've already done still applying to your enemies. That being said, the story is what keeps you invested in the game, with the twists and turns mostly revolving around things you couldn't possibly know about, but it's one of those games where you won't get stumped for too long or anything, so you can kind of just allow yourself to go through the motions. I streamed the game live on twitch.tv/ghostboy259 as well as youtube.com/realityescapeplays where the VOD still is, if you ever want to come hang out with me while I record these games live. If you want to join the Discord to recommend me games or maybe support me on Patreon, then all the links are at realityescape.ca. And while you're here, why not subscribe for a new video every week on a game you've maybe never heard of? Quist is a writer, and in this world, writing seems to be different than just putting pen to paper. Rather, the writer goes into the book itself and creates the world within it, interacting with the characters to shape their personalities. Although it's never explicitly said if reading the book is different or not, it's a very revered and highly personal career in this world, and when Quist is banned for 30 years from writing for a crime that's yet to be revealed, we find out many writers never return to writing once their sentences are over, and in fact some just choose to end their lives instead. The Collector is this shady caller who is introduced to Quist by his friend, and he tasks him with going into books and stealing high-profile items from those stories, which can then be sold to other authors to use in their books. It's not gone too in-depth how this all works because I'm sure this plot point raises a billion questions, like if you steal it from one book, does that affect every book, and can everyone enter a book, and all of that, but it's not something you need to know or need to worry about. It makes sense for what the game is doing. There's two versions of the game to play in, a fixed camera isometric version where you're actually in the books, and first person when you're in the real world. In the real world, you're completely confined to your apartment, which consists of a kitchen that is only sometimes open, and a basement where nothing ever happens. Anytime you need to be in this world, it's to start the next mission, and you can look around and see the occasional article, or knock on your neighbor's door and have a short dialogue, but in the end, it doesn't mean a whole lot or add up to anything significant. When you're in the other world, say you need a fire extinguisher, your character, or his companion Roderick, will say, hey, maybe in the other world I can get a fire extinguisher, and it's never not like that. You can never see the object beforehand. You don't see a fire and then say, wait a minute, there's a fire extinguisher back home, and solve that for yourself, because the fire extinguisher will be locked away and you can't get to it without asking your neighbor for a key first. I think there could have been some really cool puzzles that combine these two modes of play if there was just something more to do in the apartment, like mixing current technology with some stuff in the book. But I also get that it increases the scope of everything and changes the game significantly, and there's way more 3D modeling involved, and it probably would have been less ideal for this project. But as it stands, you only come to the apartment when you're directly told. You won't be able to solve anything on your own, and it just feels like a cool gimmick more than anything. Although, as we're about to get into, I also don't think they were trying to make some mind-blowing puzzler. I think they're just trying to tell a story with a little bit of things to do in between. In isometric mode, you walk around, interact with the environment, occasionally talk to people, and figure out how to proceed to the next room. Early on, you meet your companion, who you dub Roderick, who is this little thing in a brass cage from a different story, and at any point you can press a button and he will give you a pretty direct hint, which may seem a little hand-holdy, but the game is really not all that complicated anyways. I never had to use this. Someone or something in the game will pretty much always tell you what to do. There's not a lot of different places you can explore, so even if it seems like there's 8 different pathways at some point, you'll very soon realize there's probably only 2 or 3 and they all loop around. And whenever a quote-unquote puzzle comes up, the game will not let you be confused about it for even a second. It will tell you exactly what you need to do, and it won't be any challenge at all. You just go and do it. There's a few cool moments early on that gave me a lot of hope for the rest of this game. For example, there was an option to use a crowbar or maybe lockpicks on something, which I had to go around and find the pieces of that to craft, which you just do naturally by exploring. And the game warned me that by using this tool, it probably wouldn't work. So naturally I tried it anyways, and it broke the tool that I was using, meaning I had to go around and find more pieces so I could recraft it because I still needed that tool elsewhere. Stuff like that I thought was really interesting because if your tools break when you maybe need them somewhere else, you'd be forced to find a different way to the solution. However, ultimately this rarely becomes a factor after the first time. Tools didn't often break, or the tool would simply fail with no consequence, and there's not really a lot of extra supplies around. You pretty much always find exactly what you need and the right amount of it every time, so even if something breaks, it's not like there's an advantage to having more. And what started off as oh okay, this is a cool resource management aspect and your decisions can affect how you play the rest of the game, ended up just being a one-time thing that unfortunately happened at the very beginning. While you're collecting tool parts and other things, you'll find lots of junk, which at a crafting table can be turned to ink. Ink has 2 uses, one for combat, which we'll get to in a second. The other is that occasionally there will be story beats that can be solved using ink, which it's also implied that it's Quist's blood. The story makes sure to note that it's very painful for him to do and it's not something he's supposed to be doing all the time because it could be dangerous. But you also have a health bar, and using ink doesn't affect the health bar at all, like say a Disco Elysium would. Even if it did affect the health bar, combat is a nothing burger in this game, so it would not matter. It feels like there would have been a really cool chance for a payoff here, like, oh, you can use this thing but very rarely, or you can find the long way around, but if you do use this thing, there's a negative consequence. But in reality, if you have the ink, you can use it, and if you don't, then you just go look for junk that you need and then you use it. The game mildly implies, oh, you're overextending yourself by using the ink and it's your blood, so it's dangerous, but there's no setback in the game, so you just don't really feel it. Not to mention there's a little bit of continuity stuff in there because while the story mentions that you shouldn't be using it that often, because there's no negative consequence at all to the gameplay, you just wonder why any minor inconvenience can't be solved with a little bit of ink, especially considering you're carrying so much of it at all times. Combat is, well, I don't know. Look, if you're a casual gamer or maybe not super well versed into puzzles and whatnot, then this game is perfect for you because the combat won't stump you at all. It might as well not be there, but I get why it is. You only have a few moves, you can also eat food once per turn, and you find food lying around with junk and supplies. You have ink, which allows you to use moves, and there's a drain option, so you really can't run out of ink either. There's no random encounters, there's maybe 1 or 2 per level, and everything is set up specifically for you in that moment. And if you die, then the fight restarts and the enemies retain all of their damage. Most of the time I say something like, I appreciate them adding combat, but this doesn't really make me feel anything at all, not positive or negative. I just understand why it's there. There are very few moments where the game really makes you feel like you have any sort of consequence. Like sometimes Roderick will try to make you feel bad about a choice you've made, but ultimately these choices don't change anything. At least maybe I'm completely wrong. I didn't play it a second time, so maybe choosing something different changes everything. But feeling bad doesn't really change the gameplay at all. It's all very straightforward. As long as you explore every room, you'll find everything there is to find and get everything you need to move on. There's no secrets or hidden rooms or bonus lore drops or anything like that because there's just not enough game for you to find those things. I wouldn't say the story is S tier or anything like that, but it's good enough that it will keep you wanting to know what's going to happen next. There are 6 worlds that you'll visit, or 6 books. Each have their own mini-story, but the more you play, the more it unravels the larger story about Quist and his life. Since he's not revealing things, but since his companion doesn't know anything about him, you're kind of discovering it with him. The only thing that's a little odd is the order of the worlds. The first 4 are just random books. The first is a medieval one that turns out to be a modern world torture experimental chamber thing. The second is a robot-filled snowy power plant. The third is a wizard school, wonder what the inspiration for that was, and the fourth is a space-themed Excalibur cult worship thing. The fifth book, and this is minor spoilers here if you care, is a book that Quist actually wrote himself, but after he was sentenced, it was given to another author who changed a lot about the book. And the characters in the book recognize and know Quist like he's an old acquaintance, and they don't like him because of certain things that weren't actually his fault, and sometimes they don't like him because of things that were his fault. And so it muddles up the rules, but nonetheless it feels very personal. It feels like the story's coming to a head. But then after that, you go to a desert level that has nothing to do with Quist, and it just feels a little bit odd. Like, inherently, I don't mind because it's like this calm down before the final climactic encounter. We're also so close to the end at that point. It feels weird to learn so much about yourself and then walk away from it entirely, and some things they mention never really come back to light. They never really touch on it after that. The story wraps up quite nicely. I won't spoil it for you, but in the end you find out Roderick's true identity, and it's a cute little moment. I guess it's technically a plot twist, but I never suspected at any point what the answer would be. Never really alluded to his true identity much at all, so I wasn't really actively thinking, I wonder who he is. You'll never be able to guess it in a million years, so don't feel like you've been tricked or something. It's just kind of like oh, that's cute, and then moved on. But ultimately, the story was enough to keep me hooked. Truly, I think this game is just a great entry-level game for someone who maybe gets stumped by a lot of confusing logic puzzles or difficult combat. It just tells a nice story and still makes you feel involved because you're actively doing things. There are a few parts of the game that will make you think a little bit. Usually it's just remembering the order of something, but there's no harsh punishments for anything, and the narrative moves forward at a steady enough pace that it keeps you invested. There's some small gameplay stuff, like sometimes if you're standing at someone trying to talk to them and you're facing them, it won't work unless you walk away and then turn back in because you're not at the exact right spot, but they're pretty forgivable at the end of the day given how small the studio is. The game is about 7-ish hours long. I saw someone on Steam saying they played it episodically and they did one book a day for 6 days, which might be a fun way to do it if you only have like an hour or so to play. The art looks really nice and consistent. The environments, while limited, have a lot of care put into them. And the narratives of the books that you go to aren't so confusing that you get details tangled up with other things, but they're not so simple either. It's a good mix of just, it's more than nothing. It's definitely not the greatest game by any means, but it's probably also not as bad as all the things I'm saying about it. I just like to critique this kind of thing. If it sounds appealing to you, and then I think when it's cheap enough on sale, you should give it a go. You'll feel fine about your purchase at the end of the day. For now, my name is Ghostboy259, and I played Bookwalker, Thief of Tales. And next time, I'll play something else. Thanks for watching.